Your sister needs it more than you do, Olivia. Why do you always have to be so selfish? It's just an apartment. That's what my mother said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk, standing in my kitchen on a random Tuesday afternoon. She was sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one I'd bought in Seattle during my first business trip, while casually suggesting I should pack up my life and hand over my keys to my pregnant sister, Megan. Not temporarily, permanently. I didn't laugh. I didn't throw the mug across the room. I simply placed my hands flat on the countertop and said, no. One syllable, firm, clear, final. My mother's expression shifted from confident expectation to genuine shock. In 32 years, she had never heard that word from me. Not when she borrowed my college fund for Megan's wedding. Not when she volunteered me to plan Megan's baby shower and foot the bill. Not even when she gave away my childhood piano because Megan's kids might want it someday. But something had changed. Standing in my sun-drenched apartment overlooking downtown, Portland, the place I had worked 80-hour weeks to afford, I finally understood something I had been missing all these years. Some people will take until there is nothing left to give, and I was done giving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, blinking like warning lights I'd been trained to ignore. 3 weeks before the confrontation in my kitchen, my mother had called to share the wonderful news that Megan was pregnant with twins. Her second pregnancy in 2 years. Megan and her husband Derek lived in a perfectly nice 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. But according to my mother, they needed something more suitable for a growing family. Her morning sickness is terrible this time, Mom explained, her voice dripping with that special blend of concern and manipulation I'd grown familiar with. The doctor says she needs to be closer to the hospital, somewhere walkable, with good air quality. I'd murmured something supportive, not yet realizing I was being sized up for sacrifice. A week later, Megan herself had shown up unannounced on a Saturday morning. I was in yoga pants halfway through my weekend deep clean routine when the doorbell rang. There stood my sister, designer sunglasses pushed back on her head, one hand resting on her barely visible bump. "Just wanted to see how my favorite sister is doing," she'd said, walking past me into the apartment. It was the first time she'd visited in over a year, despite living just 40 minutes away. She'd wandered from room to room, opening closets, peering into my home office, running her fingers along the kitchen island. "This place is way bigger than I remembered," she'd remarked, helping herself to a sparkling water from my fridge. "How many square feet is it again?" "About 1,200, I'd answered, watching as she made herself comfortable on my couch, feet up on my coffee table. "And you're just one person," she'd said, not a question, but a statement. Like my solitude was a luxury I hadn't earned. "Must be nice to have all this space to yourself." I'd smiled tightly and changed the subject. Megan stayed for barely 30 minutes, took some photos to show Mom the view, and left without helping clean up the mess she'd made. 2 days after that, my mother had called to ask about my lease situation. "Just curious," she'd said. "Is it month to month or are you locked in?" I'd told her I owned my apartment, information she already knew. I'd invited them to my housewarming, 2 years ago after all. She'd given me a set of dish towels and a lecture about throwing money away on a mortgage when I could just live at home and save up for when I have a real family. The pieces fell into place now as I faced my mother across my kitchen island. This hadn't been an impulsive request. It had been a calculated campaign. "I don't understand why you're being difficult about this," my mother continued, putting down the mug with a sharp click against the countertop. "Your sister has 2 babies on the way. You have a spare bedroom you never use. This location would be perfect for her." "It's not a spare bedroom," I replied evenly. "It's my office, where I work 60 hours a week to afford this place." "You Could work anywhere, she waved dismissively. Your job is on a computer. Megan needs space for a nursery, for the twins. I took a slow breath. Mom, I bought this apartment. My name is on the deed. I'm not giving it to Megan. Nobody's talking about giving, she said, though we both knew that was exactly what she meant. She would contribute, when they can. Derek's business is just going through a rough patch right now. Derek's business had been going through a rough patch for the 5 years he and Megan had been married. Meanwhile, I'd built a career as a software project manager, climbing from entry-level to senior leadership through nothing but relentless work and strategic career moves. The answer is no, I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm happy to help Megan find a suitable apartment nearby if she wants to be in this area. I can even help with the search. My mother's face hardened. I didn't raise you to be this selfish. You raised me to be independent and self-sufficient, I countered. At least that's what you told me every time you couldn't attend my school. Events because you were at Megan's dance recitals. She flinched, just slightly. A direct hit. This isn't about childhood grievances, Olivia. This is about family helping family. I agree, which is why I've offered to help Megan find her own place. My mother picked up her purse, a designer bag I knew Megan had given her for Christmas. A bag that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment, despite Derek's rough patch. I thought you'd be reasonable about this, she said, disappointment radiating from every syllable. I already told Megan you'd do it. She's so excited to live here. And there it was. The trap laid bare. They had already decided. My input was a formality, my agreement assumed. They had probably already started planning where their furniture would go. I'm sorry to disappoint you both, I said, not feeling sorry at all. But this is my home. Megan needs to make other arrangements. My mother paused at the door. This conversation isn't over, Olivia. Family takes care of family. Your father would be ashamed of your behavior. My father had left when I was 4, and Megan was 7. He'd maintained sporadic contact with Megan but had effectively disappeared from my life. It was a low blow, even for my mother. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out at the city as the sun began to set. The weight of 32 years of giving in pressed on my shoulders. But for once, I didn't feel the need to carry it. Instead, I picked up my phone and made a call I'd been considering for months. Charlotte? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It's Olivia. Is that penthouse still available? Part 2. The History of Second Place. Growing up as Jennifer and Richard Taylor's second daughter meant learning to live with less attention, less praise, less priority. It wasn't that. My parents were cruel. My mother would be horrified at the suggestion. It was simply the natural order in our household that Megan's needs came first. Megan was the firstborn, the one with our father's eyes and artistic temperament. She was 7 when he left, old enough to remember him, to miss him, to need extra comfort. I was barely 4, with only the faintest impressions of a tall man who smelled like mint gum and sometimes sang in the shower. Your sister is sensitive, my mother would explain, when Megan got a new bike while I continued riding my too small hand-me-down. She's struggling with your father's absence. By the time I was in middle school, this dynamic was so ingrained that I no longer questioned it. When Megan needed a tutor for math, my college fund contributed. When Megan wanted to attend an expensive summer arts program, I stayed home and helped Mom with her bookkeeping business, unpaid. You're so practical, Olivia, my mother would say, as if this was a consolation prize for being overlooked. So mature for your age, not like your sister. I took this as a compliment then. Only years later did I recognize it for what it was, a convenient narrative that justified the imbalance of resources, attention, and opportunities. Megan was allowed to struggle, to need, to want. I was expected to manage, to cope, to make do. College changed everything for me. Thanks to scholarships and student loans, I attended Oregon State while Megan cycled through 3 different universities, before dropping out entirely. Away from the suffocating dynamics of home, I flourished. I joined clubs, made friends who valued my opinions, discovered my talent for organization and leadership. For the first time, I wasn't defined by my relationship to Megan. I was just Olivia, capable, intelligent, worthy in my own right. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at a tech company in Portland. The salary was modest, but the potential for growth was significant. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates, packed lunches, tracked every expense, and within 2 years had earned my first promotion. Meanwhile, Megan had met Derek, a charming entrepreneur with big ideas and bigger promises. They married in a lavish ceremony that my mother largely financed, despite her modest income. I served as maid of honor, helped address invitations, assembled favor bags, and wrote half the thank you notes because Megan found them too tedious. "You're so good at that stuff," she'd said, handing me a stack of cards to complete. Not a request, an expectation. After the wedding, the pattern continued. When Megan and Derek needed help with a down payment for their house, my mother remortgaged her home. When they wanted to start a family but fertility treatments weren't covered by insurance, family resources were pooled, meaning my mother's savings and my contribution, because what else was I saving for anyway? When their first son was born, Liam, now 18 months old, I was genuinely happy for them. I sent a generous gift, visited whenever invited, and never voiced the question that sometimes kept me awake at night. Why was Megan's happiness always purchased at the expense of mine? Through it all, I worked. Promotion after promotion, 60-hour weeks, networking events on weekends, online courses at night. I saved aggressively, lived modestly, and finally, at 30, achieved what had once seemed impossible. I put a down payment on my own place. The apartment wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms in a secure building downtown, with a small balcony overlooking the city. The second bedroom became my home office, crucial during the pandemic when remote. Work became the norm. My company had since adopted a hybrid model, but I still worked from home 3 days a week. I painted the walls myself, bought furniture piece by piece, filled bookshelves with volumes I'd actually read. For the first time, I had a space that reflected me, not what remained after Megan had taken her share. My mother visited once after I moved in. She walked through the rooms with a tight smile, offering suggestions for improvements rather than congratulations. "It's very urban," she'd said, staring out at the rooftops visible from my window. "Not very practical for children, is it?" "I don't have children," I'd reminded her. "Not yet," she'd replied. "But someday. You're not getting any younger, Olivia." That was 2 years ago. She hadn't visited again until today, arriving with her impossible demand disguised as a family obligation. As I sipped my wine on the balcony, thinking about Charlotte and the penthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Mom told me what happened. I can't believe you're being so stubborn. These are your niece and nephew we're talking about. Family comes first." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the appointment I'd scheduled with Charlotte, the real estate agent who had helped me buy my current apartment. The image of the penthouse filled my screen. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private roof terrace with views of Mount Hood on clear days. It was too much space for one person. It was indulgent, impractical, completely unjustifiable. Except for one thing, I wanted it. And for once, that seemed like reason enough. Daftar Sag Part 3. The Breaking Point and Beyond. The next morning brought 5 missed calls from my mother, 3 texts from Megan, and one voice message from Derek, his voice strained with forced reasonableness, explaining how this arrangement would benefit everyone. I listened once, deleted it, and headed to work. My office was 20 minutes from my apartment, a sleek building of glass and steel where I led a team of 12 project managers. Today, I had back-to-back meetings until 3, followed by a presentation to the executive team about our new product, launch. Normally, such a packed schedule would leave me drained, but today I felt oddly energized, as if my refusal to give in had uncorked some reserve of strength I hadn't known I possessed. "You seem different today," remarked Zoe, my closest friend at work as we grabbed coffee between meetings. "More, I don't know, present? Something happen?" I hesitated, then decided to share. "My mother showed up yesterday and informed me I should give my apartment to my pregnant sister." Zoe nearly choked on her latte. "Give it? Like, permanently? Not just let her stay there?" "Pretty much. Apparently Megan needs it more than I do because she's having twins, and I'm just one person taking up valuable family resources." "That's insane," Zoe said flatly. "Please tell me you laughed in her face." "Not quite, but I did say no, for possibly the first time in my life." Zoe studied me over the rim of her cup. "Good for you, though I'm guessing the fallout is just beginning." She was right. By lunchtime, my aunt had texted expressing concern about the situation with Megan. By 2, my grandmother had called, her voice wavering with emotion as she reminded me that family is everything, dear. I maintained my position calmly, refusing to be drawn into arguments or justifications. After work, I met Charlotte at the Penthouse. The moment I stepped through the door, something settled in my chest. The space was magnificent, not just the size or the views, but the feeling. Light poured through windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. The kitchen was a chef's dream, though I rarely cooked elaborate meals. The primary bedroom suite featured a walk-in closet larger than my first studio apartment and a bathroom with a soaking tub positioned to watch the sunset. "It's significantly above your original budget," Charlotte reminded me gently as I wandered from room to room. "Are you sure this is the direction you want to go?" Was I sure? 6 years of aggressive saving, living well below my means, investing wisely, and watching my portfolio grow. I'd been planning to upgrade eventually, but had been thinking of something modest, perhaps a small house in one of Portland's quieter neighborhoods. This was different. This was a statement. "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Let's make an offer." Charlotte nodded, her expression professional but pleased. "I'll draw up the paperwork tonight. With your pre-approval and strong financials, we should be in good shape, even if there are multiple bids." On the drive home, I felt a curious lightness. For years I had contained myself, making my needs small, fitting into the space left over after everyone else had taken their share. Something about walking through that penthouse, space that existed purely for enjoyment, for comfort, for beauty, had awakened a hunger in me. Not just for the apartment itself, but for the life it represented. A life where what I wanted mattered. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork, negotiations, and carefully worded responses to my family's escalating pressure. Megan's tactics evolved from guilt, "I guess my baby's health matters less than your fancy city view," to anger, "You've always been jealous of me," to bribes, "We could pay you rent once Derek's business takes off." My mother's approach was more direct. She simply showed up at my office on Thursday afternoon. "Ms. Taylor?" My assistant looked uncomfortable. "Your mother is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." I could imagine. Taking a deep breath, I told him to send her in. She entered my office like she was stepping into battle, designer handbag clutched like a shield, lips pressed, into a thin line of disapproval. "This has gone far enough, Olivia," she announced without preamble. Your sister is distraught. Her blood pressure is elevated, which is dangerous for the babies. The doctor has recommended she find stable housing immediately to reduce her stress levels. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Please, sit down. She remained standing. This isn't a social call. This is a family emergency. Nevertheless, if we're going to talk, I'd prefer you sit. After a moment of silent standoff, she sank into the chair, maintaining perfect posture, her expression unyielding. Megan's housing situation is stable, I said calmly. She and Derek own their home. They have 3 bedrooms, a yard, and live in a good school district. There is no emergency here except the one you and Megan have manufactured. The doctor said, if Megan's doctor is genuinely concerned about her living situation affecting her pregnancy, I'm happy to speak with them directly. With Megan's permission, of course. My mother's eyes narrowed. You think I'm making this up? I think Megan wants my apartment. You want to give her what she wants, and neither of you expected me to refuse. Now you're escalating the pressure. Because that's what's always worked before. You've changed, she said, and for the first time, I heard something like uncertainty in her voice. I have, I agreed. I've realized I don't have to set myself on fire to keep Megan warm. This isn't about warmth. This is about what's best for the babies. No, Mom. This is about the fact that Megan has always gotten what she wants at my expense, and for the first time, I'm saying enough. She stood abruptly. I've clearly wasted my time coming here. I thought I could appeal to your sense of family duty, but it seems you've become too selfish to care about anyone but yourself. As she reached the door, I called after her. Mom. She paused, perhaps hearing something in my voice that made her turn. I've made an offer on a new place, I said quietly. A penthouse downtown. More space than I need, honestly. 3 bedrooms. If my offer is accepted, I'll be moving within the month. At that point, if Megan and Derek want to rent my current apartment at fair market value, with a proper lease and security deposit, we can discuss it. Her expression shifted rapidly. Surprise, calculation, something that might have been respect. I'll let them know, she said finally, and left without another word. The following day, my offer on the penthouse was accepted. As I signed the mountain of paperwork, Charlotte commented on my unusual calm. Most buyers are a bundle of nerves at this stage, she observed. You seem remarkably centered. I considered this as I signed my name yet again. I think it's because this decision is fully mine. Not a compromise, not a concession, not what's left after everyone else has taken their share. Just mine. Charlotte smiled. That's exactly how it should be. That weekend, I began the process of sorting through my belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to sell. It was cathartic, handling each item and asking myself a simple question. Does this bring me joy? Does this serve me? If the answer was no, I let it go. I was in the middle of this process when my doorbell rang Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find Megan, alone, her pregnancy now more visible at 4 months along. Can I come in? She asked, her tone subdued, lacking its usual entitled edge. I stepped aside, curious rather than apprehensive. Megan entered, glancing around at the half-packed boxes and sorted piles. So it's true, she said. You're really moving. Yes, closing is in 3 weeks, then renovations, so I'll probably move in about 6 weeks. She nodded, running her fingers along the back of my couch, a gesture so reminiscent of our mother that I nearly commented on it. Mom said you might rent this place to us. That's a possibility, I confirmed. At market rate, with a formal lease and all the usual requirements. Megan looked surprised. You'd make your own sister sign a lease? Some things never changed. Yes, Megan, that's how renting property works. She sank onto the couch, suddenly, looking tired. Derek lost his job, she admitted, staring at her hands. His business has been a fiction for months. He's been too ashamed to tell anyone, taking out loans to keep up appearances. This explained a lot. I'm sorry to hear that. That must be stressful, especially with the babies coming. We can't afford market rent, she said bluntly. Not even close. I sat across from her, maintaining a careful distance. Then renting my apartment doesn't make sense for you. You should stay in your house. If you need to downsize, there are plenty of smaller, more affordable options. We're already behind on the mortgage, she admitted, her voice small. The bank. There's been talk of foreclosure. And there it was. The real emergency. The actual crisis that had driven this entire charade. Not Megan's pregnancy, not her need to be closer to the hospital, but financial desperation born of pride and pretense. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I asked. Instead of this elaborate scheme to take my apartment? Megan's eyes filled with tears. Would you have helped us if I had? The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of our shared history. Would I have helped? After all the times Megan had taken without asking, assumed without gratitude, expected without reciprocity? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I deserved the chance to make that choice based on the truth. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I know, I'm sorry. Not just for this, but for a lot of things. It wasn't enough, not even close to enough for years of being treated as less than, of being the reliable backdrop to Megan's starring role. But it was something. A crack in the facade, a glimpse of self-awareness I hadn't seen before. Let me think about how I might be able to help, I said finally. Not by giving you my apartment, but perhaps there's another solution. Megan left shortly after, our conversation unresolved, but fundamentally changed. For the first time, we had spoken as adults, without our mother's mediating influence, without the usual dynamics of Megan demanding and me acquiescing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Megan's situation, the genuine crisis, beneath the manipulative approach. The twins who would be my nieces or nephews, innocent in all of this. Derek's deception and its consequences for his family. By morning, I had the outline of a plan. Not a rescue, not a sacrifice, but something that might work for everyone involved. I made some calls, consulted my financial advisor, drafted some numbers. Then I texted my mother. I'd like to meet with you, Megan, and Derek, together, tomorrow. Evening at my place, 7 p.m. Her response came quickly. We'll be there. Next year, part 4, the revelation. They arrived together, exactly at 7. My mother, Megan, and a subdued Derek. I welcomed them into my apartment, now partially packed, and invited them to sit. I had prepared a simple spread of cheese, crackers, and fruit, along with sparkling water and wine. No one touched the food. Thank you for coming, I began, taking a seat across from them. Megan shared some information with me that changes the nature of our conversation. Derek stiffened, glancing at his wife. My mother frowned. What information? She asked sharply. That's not important right now, I said, unwilling to expose Megan's confidence even if I disagreed with her decision to hide the truth. What matters is that I've been thinking about how I might be able to help, in a way that works for everyone. I opened a folder on the coffee table and removed several sheets of paper. I've purchased a new home, I said. A penthouse downtown, with 3 bedrooms. More space than I need, but it's an investment in my future. I'll be moving there in about 6 weeks after some minor renovations are completed. I paused, noting the calculating look in my mother's eyes, the hope beginning to dawn on Megan's face. They still thought this was heading toward my giving them my current apartment. I continued. I've spoken with my financial advisor about several options. The one that makes the most sense is this. I'll keep both properties. This apartment will become a rental unit, managed by a professional property management company. My mother's expression tightened. So, you're going to be a landlord now? Charging your own sister rent she can't afford? Not exactly, I said, calmly. I'm proposing something different. Megan and Derek would live here, yes, but instead of paying rent, they would provide services. Derek spoke for the first time. What kind of services? Derek, you have experience in marketing and business development, correct? He nodded cautiously. I'm launching a side business, I explained. Consulting for tech startups looking to streamline their project management processes. I need help with marketing, client acquisition, and business operations. That would be your role, Derek. Part-time initially, with the potential to grow as the business does. I turned to Megan. And you have an arts background and experience in event planning. From my wedding planning days, she acknowledged. Before Liam. The penthouse includes a spectacular roof terrace. I'm considering making it available for small events. Corporate gatherings, intimate weddings, special occasions. You would manage that aspect of the business, also part-time, with flexible hours around your pregnancy and childcare needs. I could see them processing, calculating, wondering where the catch might be. In exchange, I continued, you would live here rent-free for 1 year. During that time, you would need to resolve your current housing situation, sell the house, settle with the bank, rebuild your credit. After the year, we would reassess. Either you would begin paying a reduced rent, or you would find another living arrangement, depending on your financial situation at that time. Silence filled the room. My mother was the first to break it. And what do you get out of this arrangement? The question was so perfectly illustrative of her worldview that I almost laughed. What did I get? As if helping Megan could only be motivated by personal gain. I get employees for my new business venture without the immediate overhead of salaries, I answered practically. I get the tax benefits of both an investment property and business expenses, and I get the satisfaction of helping my family in a way that maintains appropriate boundaries. Derek leaned forward. And who would own this business? I would, initially at least. If it proves successful and your contributions are significant, we could discuss a profit-sharing arrangement or even minority ownership stakes in the core future. My mother's eyes narrowed. This sounds like you're making them work for you, like servants. No, Mom, I said firmly. Like adults with skills and responsibilities, contributing to a household and a business in exchange for significant financial support. It's an opportunity, not a handout. Megan placed a hand on our mother's arm. It's a fair offer, Mom. More than fair. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. Thank you, Olivia. We'd like to accept. Derek nodded, relief evident in his posture. Yes, thank you. My mother wasn't ready to concede. And what about the babies? This place is smaller than their current house. The second bedroom would be the nursery, I said. And since I work from the office most days now, the home office would become Derek's workspace and a guest room when needed. It's more than adequate for a family of 4, especially in the heart of the city with parks and amenities within walking distance. She opened her mouth to object further, but Megan cut her off. Mom, stop. Olivia is offering us a lifeline when we're drowning. A chance to get back on our feet without losing everything. Please don't ruin this. It was the most adult thing I'd ever heard my sister say. Something shifted in the room, a rebalancing of power, a realignment of relationships long distorted by patterns established in childhood. Fine, my mother said, clearly unhappy but outvoted. If this is what you want, Megan. It is, my sister confirmed. It's exactly what we need right now. We spent the next hour discussing logistics, when they would move in, how they would handle the transition, what would happen with their current house. By the time they left, we had a verbal agreement and a plan to formalize everything in writing within the week. At the door, Megan hung back after Derek and our mother had headed to the car. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. especially after how we approached it initially. I know I didn't have to, I replied. I chose to, on my terms. She nodded, understanding the distinction. Can I see it, the penthouse, before you move in? I hesitated, then made a decision. I have the keys. We could go now, if you want. Megan glanced toward the car where our mother and Derek waited. Now? Why not? It's only 10 minutes away. Tell them you'll be back in an hour. 20 minutes later, we stood in the empty penthouse. I flipped on lights as we entered, illuminating the vast open-concept living area, the wall of windows, showcasing the city lights below, the gleaming kitchen with its waterfall island and professional-grade appliances. Oh my God, Megan breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. Olivia, this is incredible. I said nothing, letting her explore. She moved from room to room, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, her expressions shifting, from amazement to something more complex, perhaps understanding, perhaps envy, perhaps respect. On the roof terrace, she stood at the railing, gazing out at the city spread below us like a carpet of stars. You did all this on your own, she said finally. No help, no shortcuts, no one smoothing the way for you. Yes, I agreed simply. While I was taking and taking, you were building something real. She turned to face me, her eyes bright with tears. I've been so stupid, Liv. So entitled and blind. The childhood nickname caught me off guard. She hadn't called me that in years. We all played our parts, I said, more generous in victory than I might have been otherwise. Mom set the stage, but we performed the roles assigned to us. You as the needy one, me as the reliable one. And now, I smiled, feeling the cool evening breeze on my face, standing tall in a space that was entirely mine. Now we write new roles, or better yet, we stop performing altogether and just live our lives. As sisters, as equals, as adults who make their own choices and live with the consequences. Megan nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. I'd like that. We stood in silence for a while longer, side by side but not touching, looking out at the same view but perhaps seeing different futures. Mom's going to lose her mind when she sees this place, Megan said finally, a hint of her old mischief in her voice. I laughed. Probably, but that's for another day. As we left, locking the door behind us, I felt a strange sense of completion. Not an ending. Our family story was far too complicated for neat resolutions. But perhaps the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. One where I stood firmly at the center of my own life, making room for others by choice rather than by surrender. 6 weeks later, after the renovations were complete and my belongings had been moved in, I invited my mother, Megan, and Derek for dinner at the Penthouse. Megan and Derek had already settled into my former apartment, beginning their new roles in our shared business venture with surprising enthusiasm. Derek had revealed a genuine talent for marketing, and Megan's eye for design had transformed the roof terrace into a space that practically sold itself to potential clients. My mother arrived last, her expression guarded as she stepped into the elevator that would take us to the top floor. When the doors opened directly into my foyer, revealing the penthouse in all its glory, now furnished, art on the walls, fresh flowers on the tables, she froze. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my home," I said simply. "Welcome." She moved through the space as if in a trance, touching surfaces, staring out windows, opening doors to reveal rooms that dwarfed anything she had imagined. When we stepped onto the roof terrace, set for dinner with a view of Mount Hood in the distance, something in her composure finally broke. "All this time," my mother said, her voice uncharacteristically small, "you could afford something like this? While we've been worried sick about Megan's situation?" I took a deep breath, savoring the clean mountain air. Yes and no. I've been working toward this for years, saving, investing, advancing in my career. It wasn't a matter of having money sitting around that I refused to share. It was a matter of building something for myself, step by step. My mother sank into one of the cushioned chairs, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I don't understand you, Olivia. I never have. It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I know, I replied, not unkindly. You never needed to understand me. You just needed me to understand what you wanted from me. Megan and Derek joined us on the terrace, Megan carrying a tray of drinks, Derek following with appetizers I'd prepared earlier. The domesticity of the scene, my sister helping in my kitchen, her husband moving comfortably through my space, seemed to further disconcert our mother. You two seem settled, she observed sharply. Derek nodded, placing the tray on the table. Olivia's been great. The business is already gaining traction. We've booked 2 corporate events for the terrace next month, and 3 potential consulting clients are reviewing proposals. We've worked out a childcare arrangement too, Megan added, settling into a chair beside our mother. I'll handle most client meetings while Liam's at preschool, and Olivia's agreed to a flexible schedule when the twins arrive that lets me work primarily from home for the first few months. My mother looked between us, suspicious of this newfound cooperation. And you're both happy with this arrangement? More than happy, Megan said firmly. It's a chance to build something sustainable. I'm using my event planning background again. Derek's putting his business skills to work, and we're learning how to manage finances properly. She glanced at me. Olivia even connected us with her financial advisor to create a plan for rebuilding our credit. And what happens when the year is up? My mother pressed. When you're expected to start paying rent? Mom, I interjected. That's for Megan and Derek to worry about, not you. And they're already taking steps to ensure they'll be in a better position by then. Steps like what? Derek spoke up, surprising me with his directness. We've listed our house for sale. It's a short sale, which isn't ideal for our credit, but it's better than foreclosure. The market in our area is strong enough that we might even walk away with a small amount after settling with the bank. You're selling your beautiful home? My mother looked stricken. The one with the yard for Liam? The one we couldn't afford, Megan corrected gently. The one that was drowning us in debt while Derek pretended everything was fine. We're being realistic now. Something shifted in my mother's expression, a flicker of uncertainty, as if the script she'd been following had suddenly changed, leaving her without lines. I moved to serve dinner, a simple but elegant meal I'd prepared myself. As we ate, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. Derek spoke about his ideas for expanding our client base. Megan shared updates on her pregnancy. The twins were girls, healthy and active. I discussed my plans for the penthouse, including converting the 3rd bedroom into a proper home office that could accommodate client meetings when needed. My mother remained largely silent, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't until we'd finished dessert that she finally spoke directly to me. "This is really yours? All of it?" she asked, gesturing to encompass not just the penthouse, but perhaps everything it represented: success, independence, choice. "Yes," I said simply. "All of it." "I had no idea you were doing so well." There was a note in her voice I'd never heard before, something like respect, or perhaps regret. "You never asked," I pointed out, "about my work, my goals, my achievements. You were always too busy worrying about Megan." The words hung in the air between us, not an accusation, but a statement of fact. For once, she didn't deny it or deflect. "I suppose I was," she admitted. "It seemed necessary. Megan always needed more help, more attention." "Did she?" I challenged gently. "Or did we all just assume she did because that was the dynamic we'd established?" Megan shifted uncomfortably. It's not entirely Mom's fault, Liv. I played into it too. It was easier to let everyone rush in to fix my problems than to face them myself. Derek reached for her hand. We both did. It's hard to admit when you're failing, especially when you've convinced everyone, including yourself, that you're doing fine. My mother looked between us, her worldview visibly realigning. So what happens now? With all of us? I considered the question carefully. That depends. Are you willing to see me differently? Not as roles in a family drama, but as adults making our own choices. I don't know, she answered with surprising honesty. I've spent so long thinking of you as the strong one, the one who doesn't need anything, that it's hard to see you any other way. I am strong, I acknowledged, but that doesn't mean I don't need things. It just means I've learned to provide them for myself because I couldn't count on anyone else to prioritize my needs. A tear slipped down my mother's cheek, surprising us all. She brushed it away quickly. I've made a mess of things, haven't I? Rather than rushing to reassure her, as I would have done in the past, I let the question stand. In some ways, yes, but it's never too late to do better. She nodded slowly. I'd like to try. She looked around the penthouse terrace, taking in the spectacular view, the elegant furniture, the space I'd created for myself. I'd like to know this, Olivia, the one who built all this. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was an opening, a crack in the fortress of family mythology we'd all inhabited for so long. I decided to step through it. I'd like that too, I said, and meant it. As the evening wound down, Megan and Derek prepared to leave first. At the elevator, Megan hugged me, a real embrace, not the perfunctory gesture we'd exchanged at holidays and family gatherings. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for the apartment, but for showing me another way to be. I hugged her back, feeling the slight swell of her pregnancy between us, the physical embodiment of the future we were now building together, differently than before. We're going to be okay, I told her. All of us, in our own ways. After. They left, my mother lingered, moving through the penthouse once more, this time with a different energy, less judgmental, more curious. You have excellent taste, she commented, running her fingers along the marble countertop in the kitchen. This place suits you. Thank you, I said, accepting the compliment without deflection. She paused by the large windows in the living room, staring out at the city lights. I always thought you were holding back, being cautious, practical, because that was your nature. I never considered that you might be capable of this. Of what exactly? Boldness, vision. Taking up space, I smiled. I've always been capable of those things. I just chose when and how to express them. She turned to face me. I'm beginning to see that. She hesitated, then added, Your father would be proud. Once, that comment would have cut deep, a reminder of the parent who had chosen to leave, who had maintained contact with Megan but not with me. Now it barely registered. Perhaps, I said. But his opinion doesn't matter to me anymore. Hasn't for a long time. My mother looked startled, then thoughtful. No, I suppose it wouldn't. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. This arrangement with Megan and Derek, it's generous. More generous than I would have been in your position. It's not about generosity, I corrected. It's about creating something that works for all of us. I get to help them without sacrificing my boundaries. They get support without surrendering their dignity or responsibility. It's actually quite practical. She smiled faintly. Always the problem solver. Only when there are actual problems to solve, not manufactured crises or emotional manipulations. She flinched slightly but nodded. Fair enough. At the elevator, she hesitated. Would it be all right if I came for dinner again sometime? Perhaps next week? The question was tentative, lacking the assumption of entitlement that had characterized so many of her demands over the years. It was a request, not an expectation. "I'd like that," I said. "Tuesday works for me." She stepped into the elevator, turning to face me as the doors began to close. "I'm proud of you, Olivia. I should have told you that a long time ago." Bye. Doors closed before I could respond, which was probably for the best. Some recognitions come too late to fulfill their original purpose, but can still serve as foundations for something new. I moved through my penthouse, turning off lights, straightening cushions, closing blinds. In the master bedroom, I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city that had always felt like home to me, even when I'd been made to feel that my desires were secondary, my needs negligible. Tomorrow, I had meetings with potential clients, a lunch with Zoe to catch up, and plans to review the marketing materials Derek had developed for our fledgling business. My life was full, purposeful, and increasingly on my own terms. I thought about the path that had led me here, not just to this penthouse or this career, but to this version of myself. A self that could stand firm in her own worth without apology or justification. A self that could help family without being consumed by their needs. A self that recognized the difference between genuine care and habitual sacrifice. It had been a long journey, and at times a lonely one. But standing in this space that was entirely mine, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Not triumph, exactly, but alignment. As if all the pieces of my life were finally arranged in a pattern that made sense. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Home safe." Liam asked when he can visit Aunt Olivia's castle in the sky. "Maybe this weekend? We could bring lunch." I smiled and texted back, "Saturday works. Tell him I have a special place picked." Out for us to eat, with clouds below and mountains beyond. My sister's response came quickly. "He'll love that." "So will I." "Good night, Liv, and thanks again. For everything." I placed my phone on the nightstand and prepared for bed, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. Whatever happened. Next, with my family, my career, my life, I would face it from a position of strength, not as someone desperately seeking approval or permission, but as someone who had claimed her own space in the world. In the morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the distant silhouette of Mount Hood visible against the clear sky. I made coffee in my expansive kitchen, carried it to the roof terrace, and sat in quiet contemplation as the city came to life below me. My phone rang, my mother, calling at an uncharacteristically early hour. "Olivia, I hope I'm not waking you." "Not at all," I assured her. "I'm on the terrace having coffee." "Oh," she sounded almost wistful. "That must be lovely." "It is," I agreed. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about seeing each other differently, and I realize there's so much I don't know about you, about your work, your life. I'd like to change that." I took a sip of coffee, considering. I'd like that too. I thought perhaps. She hesitated. "Perhaps I could come to one of your business events, the ones Megan is organizing, to see what you've built, if that wouldn't be intrusive." The request surprised me, not just its content, but the careful way it was phrased, with respect for my boundaries. "I think that could work," I said. "We have a client event next month. I'll have Megan add you to the guest list." "Thank you." She paused, then added, "I'm trying, Olivia. It's not easy to change patterns that have existed for decades, but I am trying." "I know," I said, and found that I believed her. That's all any of us can do. After we hung up, I remained on the terrace, watching as the morning light transformed the city below. Change was rarely linear or complete. There would be backsliding, old patterns reasserting themselves, moments of frustration and disappointment, but there would also be progress, however incremental. For now, that was enough. The knowledge that we were all moving, however unevenly, toward something better. Not perfection, but perhaps a more honest version of family. One built on respect, rather than expectation. On choice, rather than obligation. I finished my coffee, went inside to prepare for the day, and paused before the mirror in my bedroom. The woman who looked back at me seemed different somehow, more settled in her skin, more certain of her place in the world. "Good morning," I said to my reflection, a small ritual I'd begun since moving into the penthouse. Not a question, not a plea for approval, but a simple acknowledgement of my presence, my worth, my right to take up space. From the beginning, this had never really been about the apartment or even the penthouse. It had been about something far more fundamental, the right to define myself on my own terms, to make choices based on my own needs rather than others' expectations. In refusing to give up my apartment, I had claimed something far more valuable than real estate. I had claimed myself. The realization settled over me like a mantle, comfortable and right. Whatever challenges lay ahead, with family, with work, with life, I would face them standing firmly on the foundation I had built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. Not perfect, not complete, but unquestionably mine. 2 weeks later, I invited Zoe over for dinner, eager to share my new home with someone who had witnessed my journey from a different perspective. "Holy hell, Olivia!" she exclaimed as she stepped out of the elevator into my foyer. "When you said penthouse, I was picturing something nice, but this..." She spun in a slow circle, taking in the soaring ceilings, the wall of windows, the carefully curated furnishings. "This is another level entirely." I laughed, pleased by her reaction. "Come see the terrace. That's the real showstopper." As expected, Zoe was suitably impressed by the outdoor space, with its unobstructed views and comfortable seating areas. We settled in with wine and the appetizers I'd prepared, the city spreading below us like a living map. "So how are things going with the family experiment?" she asked, reaching for an olive. "Last I heard, your sister and her husband had moved into your old place and were working for your new consulting business." "Surprisingly well," I admitted. "Derek has a genuine talent for marketing. He's already brought in 3 new clients. And Megan has transformed the terrace into an event space that practically sells itself. We've booked 6 corporate events and 2 intimate weddings for the summer." Zoe studied me over the rim of her glass. "And how does it feel? Being the one in charge instead of the one always giving in?" I considered the question, wanting to be honest. "Different. Good, mostly. There are moments of awkwardness, times when old patterns try to reassert themselves. But we're all learning, creating something new." "And your mom? How's she handling the power shift?" I smiled, thinking of my mother's recent efforts, the careful texts asking how my day was going, the genuine interest in my work during our weekly dinners, the tentative steps toward seeing me as I was rather than as she had. Always defined me. "She's trying," I said simply. "It's not perfect, but it's progress." Zoe raised her glass in a toast. "To progress, then. And to you, finally claiming your due." We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this friend who had seen my worth long before I had fully claimed it myself. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with dessert, Zoe asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd given in this time? If you'd handed over your apartment like they expected?" I hadn't, actually. The decision to refuse had felt so clear, so necessary, that I hadn't spared much thought for the alternative. "I think," I said slowly, "that it would have confirmed something for all of us, that my needs would always be secondary, that my role was to sacrifice, to accommodate, to make do with less. And once that pattern was reinforced, it would have been nearly impossible to break." Zoe nodded thoughtfully. "One choice can change everything, can't it?" "Yes," I agreed. But it's rarely just one choice. It's all the choices that led up to that moment, the ones that built the strength and clarity to finally say no. Later, after Zoe had left, I stood on the terrace alone, counting stars in the clear night sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan, a photo of Liam asleep surrounded by building blocks with the caption, "Creating his own penthouse, dreams big, like his aunt." I smiled, saving the image. There was healing in this new version of family we were creating. Not perfect or complete, but honest in a way it had never been before. The next morning, I had a breakfast meeting with a potential client at a cafe downstairs. As I prepared to leave, checking my presentation materials one last time, I caught sight of a frame on my desk. A simple black border containing a single word in elegant calligraphy, "Mine." It had been a gift from Zoe delivered the day after I moved in. "To remind you," the card had read, "that some things don't need to be shared." I touched the frame lightly, a quiet acknowledgement of how far I had come. Then I gathered my things, headed for the elevator, and stepped into the day, grounded in my worth, clear in my boundaries, and finally, fully at home in myself. 3 months later, on a warm summer evening, my terrace hosted its first major event, a product launch for a sustainable technology company. Megan had outdone herself with the planning, transforming the space with subtle lighting, elegant floral arrangements, and a layout that maximized both the views and interaction among guests. I moved through the crowd, greeting clients, making introductions, noting with pride how seamlessly Derek managed the marketing team he had assembled. Near the bar, I spotted my mother deep in conversation with the CEO of the technology company, looking engaged and at ease. "Your mother is charming," my boss observed Alexis, the company's marketing director, appearing at my elbow with a glass of champagne. "She mentioned she's thinking of investing in sustainable tech. Is she in the industry?" I nearly laughed at the idea of my mother, a retired bookkeeper with modest savings, being mistaken for a potential investor. But something in her animated expression, the genuine interest with which she listened, stopped me. "Not exactly," I said diplomatically. "But she's developing new interests, broadening her horizons." Alexis nodded. "Well, she asks good questions. Sharp ones." As the evening progressed, I found myself observing my mother with new eyes. She circulated confidently, engaged in substantive conversations, seemed genuinely interested in the technological innovations being showcased. Not once did she pull me aside to discuss family matters or make passive-aggressive comments about my choices. When the event wound down and the last guests departed, leaving just family, behind, my mother joined me at the railing, gazing out at the city lights. "That was extraordinary, Olivia," she said quietly. "Seeing you in your element like that. You were so assured, so knowledgeable." "Thank you," I said, accepting the compliment without deflection. "I've been in this industry for a decade. It's my world." She nodded, a flicker of something like regret crossing her face. "I'm beginning to understand that, to see how much I've missed by viewing you only through the lens of family obligations." Behind us, Megan and Derek were supervising the cleanup, working efficiently with the staff they'd hired for the event. My mother watched them for a moment, then turned back to me. "I had a long talk with Dr. Mercer this afternoon," she said. Suddenly, I blinked, surprised. Dr. Mercer was Megan's obstetrician. "Is everything okay with the pregnancy?" "Oh yes, everything's fine with Megan and the twins." This was about me, actually. She took a deep breath. "I've been seeing a therapist, Olivia, for the past month." This was unexpected. My mother had always dismissed therapy as paying strangers to listen to your problems, and had scoffed at the idea of professional help for emotional issues. That's good, Mom, if it's helping you." "It is." She gazed out at the cityscape. One of the things we've been discussing is my tendency to see Megan as fragile and you as invulnerable. How unfair that's been to both of you? I remained silent, sensing she had more to say. Dr. Mercer suggested I observe you in your professional environment, to see you as others do, not just as my daughter who never seems to need anything. She turned to face me fully. I saw it tonight. Your competence, your confidence, the respect others have for you. I'm proud of you, Olivia. And I'm sorry that my pride has been so long in coming. It wasn't a complete transformation, of course. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. But it was a recognition, honest and unforced, of something I had needed for longer than I could remember. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot to me. She nodded, then glanced back at Megan and Derek. They're different too. More responsible, more adult somehow. Working with you has been good for them. It's been good for all of us, I acknowledged. Creating something together, with clear boundaries and expectations, has changed the dynamic. My mother was quiet for a moment, then asked hesitantly, "Do you think there might be a place for me in this business of yours? Not as an investor, I know my limitations, but perhaps in some small way?" The question caught me off guard. What did you have in mind? She shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I don't know exactly. My bookkeeping experience is outdated, and I know nothing about technology. But I'm good with people, and I have time now that I'm retired. Maybe I could help with client relations or event support? I considered the request carefully, wary of falling back into old patterns of accommodation. But there was something different in her manner, a humility, a willingness to fit into the world I had created rather than expecting me to conform to hers. We could start small, I offered. Perhaps you could help Megan with event coordination, see how it goes. Her face lit up with a genuine smile. I'd like that. Thank you for considering it. As we rejoined Megan and Derek, watching as they directed the last stages of cleanup with newfound confidence, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me for years. Not an ending. Our family story was far too complicated for neat resolutions, but perhaps the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another, one in which we all stood on more equal footing, seeing each other more clearly, respecting each other's boundaries more consistently. Later that night, after everyone had gone and I was alone in my penthouse, I stood on the terrace one last time, breathing in the night air. Below me, the city pulsed with life. Thousands of stories unfolding in apartments and houses, each with their own complexities and contradictions. Mine was just one story among many, not perfect or complete, but authentically my own. And for now, that was enough. In the months that followed, our business flourished. The consulting side expanded to include 3 full-time employees beyond our family core. The event space became sought after for exclusive gatherings, booked solid 6 months in advance. Derek discovered a talent for client acquisition that surprised us all. Megan's creative vision elevated every event. And my mother, starting small, as promised, gradually found her place. Her natural charm and attention to detail making her valuable in ways none of us had anticipated. When the twins were born in early fall, healthy, identical girls named Emma and Claire, we adjusted again. The consulting business shifted temporarily to more remote work. The event schedule thinned during Megan's recovery. My mother stepped up, proving herself capable of handling clients and coordinating details with minimal supervision. I expanded the business into the 3rd bedroom of the penthouse, creating a proper office suite where client meetings could be held with the city as backdrop. On days when Megan brought the twins for brief visits, their presence in the space felt right. Not an intrusion or an obligation, but a natural extension of the new family dynamics we were building. One evening, as I worked late finalizing a major contract, My mother stopped by on her way home from an event she had managed successfully without Megan's oversight. "You should go home," she chided gently, finding me still at my desk. "It's past 9. I smiled, saving the document I'd been reviewing. "I'm almost done. Just wanted to get this wrapped up before tomorrow's meeting." She nodded, understanding. The drive that kept me working after others had left for the day. "I brought you something," she said, placing a small wrapped package on my desk. "An early birthday gift." My birthday was still 3 weeks away. Curious, I unwrapped the package to find a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Myself at about 4 years old, sitting at a child-sized desk, intensely focused on a drawing. "Where did this come from?" I asked, studying the image of my younger self. "I found it when I was going through old albums," my mother explained. "It struck me how complete you look, even then. Focused, determined, whole within yourself." She touched the frame gently. "I should have seen it sooner, that your self-sufficiency wasn't just a convenience for me, but a fundamental part of who you are. Something to respect, not exploit." The acknowledgement, coming so many years after it might have made a difference to my childhood self, nevertheless created a warm glow in my chest. "Thank you," I said, placing the photograph on my desk where I could see it daily. "For seeing me now?" She smiled, a touch of sadness in her eyes. "Better late than never, I hope." As she turned to leave, I made a spontaneous decision. "Mom, the client we're meeting tomorrow, they're looking for someone to manage their corporate events program on a part-time basis. Someone organized, detail-oriented, good with people. I was thinking you might be interested." She turned back, surprised. "Me? But I've only been helping out for a few months." "And doing an excellent job," I pointed out. "This would be your own client, your own project, separate from the family business, but with our support when needed." The offer hung between us, not an obligation or expectation, but an opportunity, one professional to another. "I'd like that," she said finally, standing a little straighter. "Very much." After she left, I remained at my desk, reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. From that moment in my kitchen, when I had finally said no, to this evening, when I could offer a genuine opportunity without fear of being consumed by others' needs. The penthouse around me was quiet, the city beyond the windows alive with light and movement. In this space I had claimed for myself, I had ultimately found room for others as well, not through sacrifice or erasure, but through choice and clear boundaries. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that threatened to resurface, expectations that needed to be recalibrated. But we were learning, all of us, how to see each other more clearly, how to respect each other's needs and limitations, how to be family without using that word as a weapon or a chain. I picked up the photograph my mother had brought, studying my 4-year-old self. The focus in those young eyes, the determination in that small face. I had always had these qualities within me. The strength, the clarity, the capacity to stand firm in my own worth. It had simply taken 32 years, an attempted apartment theft, and a penthouse revelation for others to see them too. I placed the photograph beside the framed mine on my desk, 2 reminders of different but complementary truths. That I had always been complete in myself, and that claiming what was rightfully mine had ultimately created more, not less, for everyone. Outside, the city lights reflected in the windows, mirroring the stars above. I gathered my things, turned off my desk lamp, and headed for my bedroom, moving through spaces that were entirely my own by choice and by right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new boundaries to maintain. But tonight, in this home I had created for myself, I was at peace with all that had led me here. The girl in the photograph had known who she was all along. Now, finally, So did everyone else. 6 months had passed since that dinner on my penthouse terrace. The autumn air had given way to winter chill, and now spring was beginning to emerge again, bringing new growth and transformation, not just to the city around us, but to our family as well. The twins, Emma and Claire, were now 3 months old, tiny bundles of energy with Megan's eyes and surprising personalities already emerging. Emma, the firstborn by 7 minutes, was watchful and calm, while Claire seemed determined to experience everything at maximum volume and intensity. I visited them regularly at my former apartment, which had been transformed by Megan and Derek into a comfortable family home. The spare bedroom that had once been my office now housed 2 white cribs and a rocking chair, where Megan spent countless hours nursing, reading, singing, and simply being present with her daughters. Today was a special occasion. The twins' first visit to the penthouse. Megan had finally felt ready to venture out with both babies for more than a quick errand, and I'd invited them for Sunday brunch on the terrace, weather permitting. I was arranging flowers in the center of the outdoor dining table when the elevator chimed. The doors slid open to reveal Megan pushing a double stroller, Derek following with what appeared to be enough baby supplies for a week-long expedition, and my mother bringing up the rear with Liam, now a curious 2-year-old, holding her hand. "Sorry we're late," Megan called, maneuvering the stroller into the foyer. Getting 4 people out the door is apparently the equivalent of planning a military campaign. I smiled, moving to help Derek with the bags. "No rush. Everything's ready whenever you are." Liam broke free from my mother's grasp and ran toward me, arms outstretched. "Auntie Liv, up." I scooped him up, settling him on my hip with practiced ease. Over the past months, he had become a regular visitor, spending one afternoon each week with me while Megan caught up on work or simply took a much-needed break. We had developed our own rituals: baking cookies, building elaborate block towers, reading the same dinosaur book so many times I could recite it from memory. "I made your favorite," I told him conspiratorially. "Blueberry pancakes." His eyes widened. "With whipped cream? Is there any other way?" I asked seriously, and was rewarded with his delighted giggle. I carried him to the terrace, where he immediately ran to press his face against the glass railing, staring down at the city below in fascination. My mother followed, keeping a watchful eye on him while I returned to help with the twins. Megan was unbuckling Claire from the stroller, while Derek held a sleeping Emma. The contrast between their current dynamic and how they had been 6 months ago was striking. Gone was the desperate couple who had tried to manipulate their way into my apartment. In their place stood 2 tired but competent parents who were slowly but surely finding their footing. "How's the new client project going?" I asked Derek as we moved toward the terrace, careful not to wake Emma. "Better than expected," he replied, his voice low. "We've ironed out the initial issues with their marketing strategy, and they've already seen a 15% increase in engagement. They're talking about extending the contract through next quarter." I nodded, pleased but not surprised. Derek's transformation had been perhaps the most unexpected development of our arrangement. Freed from the pretense of running a failing business and the pressure of maintaining appearances, he had discovered genuine talent and dedication as our business development lead. The clients he brought in consistently praised his insight and attention to detail. On the terrace, we settled around the table I'd set for brunch. The weather had cooperated beautifully. 65 degrees, clear skies, with just enough breeze to be pleasant without disturbing the napkins or tablecloth. Mount Hood was visible in the distance, still snow-capped against the blue sky. "This is lovely, Olivia," my mother said, helping Liam into a booster seat. "Such a perfect day for the baby's first visit." There was genuine warmth in her voice, without the undercurrent of comparison or criticism that had once been constant. The therapy she had begun months ago seemed to be making a difference, though we all recognized that changing lifelong patterns was an ongoing process, not a destination. Megan adjusted Claire in her arms, the baby now awake and alert, taking in the new surroundings with wide eyes. "I still can't believe we get to work in a place like this," she remarked, gesturing to the spectacular view. "Sometimes when I'm setting up for an event, I just stop and stare for a minute. It never gets old." "Speaking of events," Derek said, carefully transferring the still sleeping Emma to a portable bassinet we'd set up in a shaded area of the terrace. "The Westbrook Foundation called yesterday. They want to book the space for their annual donor recognition dinner. It would be our largest event yet." I raised my eyebrows, impressed. The Westbrook Foundation was one of the most prestigious charitable organizations in the city, known for its lavish appreciation events. "That's a significant get. When are they looking to hold it?" "September," Megan answered, "which gives us plenty of time to plan. I already have some ideas for the layout and theme." As she launched into a description of her vision for the core event, I caught my mother watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "What?" I asked during a pause in Megan's explanation. My mother shook her head slightly. "Nothing, really. It's just, sometimes I look at you, at all of you, and I hardly recognize the family we've become. In a good way," she added quickly. It was true. The dynamic between us had shifted dramatically over the past months, not without occasional tension or backsliding, but with a fundamental change in how we related to each other. Megan and I had developed a relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition or resentment. Derek had found purpose and confidence in meaningful work. My mother was learning to see each of us as we actually were, not as the roles she had assigned us. And I had found that maintaining boundaries didn't mean isolation, that I could be connected without being consumed, generous without being depleted. As we ate, conversation flowed easily from business to family to the wider world. Liam entertained us with a detailed description of a bug he had found in the park. Derek discussed a new marketing approach he wanted to try. My mother shared an anecdote from the senior center where she now volunteered once a week. Simple, ordinary moments of family connection that had once seemed impossible now unfolded naturally. After brunch, as Megan fed the twins and my mother supervised Liam's careful exploration of the terrace plants, Derek helped me clear the table. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher. "An idea I've been considering." I nodded, curious. "Go ahead." "Our year rent-free is more than halfway over," he began. "Megan and I have been talking about next steps. We've rebuilt some savings, my credit score is climbing, and the sale of the house settled more debt than we expected." "That's great progress," I acknowledged, genuinely pleased for them. "We're not in a position to buy a place yet," he continued, "but we could handle a reasonable rent. The thing is, we've realized we don't need as much space as we thought. The apartment is perfect, close to everything, secure building, good schools nearby for when Liam's older." I waited, sensing there was more. "We'd like to stay," he said finally, "as proper tenants with a formal lease at market rate. No special treatment, no family discount." The proposal shouldn't have surprised me, yet somehow it did. I had assumed they would eventually want to move back to a house with a yard, to recreate the suburban lifestyle they'd had before. "You're sure?" I asked. 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment might get tight as they grow. Derek nodded. "We've thought about that. The living room is spacious enough that we could eventually convert part of it to a 3rd bedroom if needed. But more importantly, we've realized that what matters isn't the size of the space, but what we do with it." There was a maturity in his assessment that would have been unimaginable a year ago, when status and appearances had driven their choices. "I'd need to think about it," I told him honestly. "Not because I don't want you as tenants, but because I want to make sure the arrangement truly works for everyone. No hidden resentments or unspoken expectations." "Of course," he agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need. We just wanted you to know we're interested and we're prepared to make it a proper business arrangement." as he returned to the ICO terrace. I found myself contemplating how profoundly our perspectives had shifted. A year ago, the idea of Megan and Derek as my tenants would have seemed like a recipe for boundary violations and emotional manipulation. Now, it felt like a potentially reasonable arrangement between adults who respected each other's positions. The difference wasn't in the proposal itself, but in who we had become. Later, after they had left and I was alone in the penthouse once more, I wandered to the terrace with a cup of tea, watching as evening descended on the city. Lights began to illuminate the buildings below, creating a tapestry of human activity and connection. My phone chimed with a text from Zoe. "How was baby invasion day? Apartment still standing?" I smiled, typing back, "All good." Turns out babies appreciate panoramic views too. Her response came quickly. "Everything better with a view. Speaking of which, still on for dinner Friday? Have big news." I confirmed, curious about her news but content to wait. As I set down my phone, I noticed a small stuffed elephant Liam had left behind, tucked half under a cushion on one of the terrace chairs. I retrieved it, running my fingers over the soft fabric, thinking about how naturally children claimed space, dropping pieces of themselves wherever they went, marking territory not with possessiveness, but with unself-conscious belonging. There was a lesson in that, perhaps. The possibility of presence without possession, of connection without consumption, of family as a choice repeatedly made, rather than an obligation endlessly fulfilled. I tucked the elephant into my pocket to return on our next visit, and went inside as the evening air grew cool, carrying these thoughts with me like seeds planted in newly workable soil. Friday evening found me at Zoe's favorite restaurant downtown, a small Italian place with exceptional pasta and a wine list that made her eyes light up. "You look great," she commented as we settled at our usual corner table. "Somehow more relaxed? Is that even the right word?" I considered this as I unfolded my napkin. Maybe centered is more accurate. Things have fallen into a rhythm that works. The family business experiment is still going smoothly then? She raised an eyebrow, having initially been skeptical about the arrangement. Surprisingly, yes. There have been moments of tension, but nothing we couldn't work through. Megan and Derek have actually asked about staying on as tenants when the rent-free year ends. Zoe's eyes widened slightly. "And you're considering it?" "I am," I admitted. "They've changed, Zoe. We all have. It's not the same dynamic anymore." She studied me for a moment. "If anyone had told me a year ago that you'd be contemplating a long-term rental arrangement with the sister who tried to steal your apartment, I would have said they were delusional. But you seem at peace with it." "I am," I realized, somewhat surprised by my own certainty. "It's not about the apartment anymore. It's about the relationships we're building, the boundaries we're respecting, the people we're becoming." Zoe raised her wine glass. "To evolution, then, speaking of which." "Your big news," I prompted, suddenly remembering her text. She set down her glass, a mix of excitement and nervousness crossing her face. "I've been offered a position as regional director for the company's European operations, based in London, overseeing projects across the EU." I sat back, genuinely surprised. "Zoe, that's incredible. It's perfect for you." She had been talking about international opportunities for years, frustrated by the limitations of our local office despite her rapid advancement. "It is perfect," she agreed, then hesitated. "But it means leaving Portland, leaving you and the friendship we've built." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. As if an ocean could diminish this friendship. We'll text, call, visit. I'll finally have a reason to use my vacation days. "You're not upset?" "How could I be? This is what you've been working toward. I'm thrilled for you." She visibly relaxed. "Thank you. Part of me was worried you'd feel abandoned, especially after everything you've been through with your family." I shook my head. That's the old dynamic talking, the one where everyone's choices revolved around meeting others' emotional needs. I'm not that person anymore. Your success is yours to claim, just as my choices are mine. As we clinked glasses to celebrate her news, I reflected on how profoundly my perspective had shifted. A year ago, I might indeed have felt a twinge of abandonment, might have wondered why everyone I cared about eventually left. Now I understood that Zoe's opportunity wasn't about me at all, and that was precisely as it should be. "So when do you leave?" I asked, returning to my pasta. 6 weeks, she replied. Barely enough time to sublet my apartment and decide what to ship versus what to store. A thought occurred to me suddenly. What if you didn't have to sublet? What if I bought your apartment? Zoe paused, fork halfway to her mouth. You want to buy my apartment? You already have a penthouse and a rental property. Exactly, I said, the idea taking shape as I spoke. I've been thinking about expanding the real estate side of my investments. Your building is in an excellent location. The property values in that area have been steadily increasing, and I know the apartment is well maintained because you've lived there. She set down her fork, considering. Are you serious about this? Completely, I assured her. It would be a legitimate investment for me and would save you the hassle of finding a reliable tenant while you're overseas. We could have it appraised to ensure the price is fair to both of us. This feels suspiciously like helping a friend, she teased. I laughed. It can be both. A sound business decision that also happens to benefit someone I care about. That's the sweet spot, isn't it? When doing well and doing good align. We spent the rest of dinner discussing the potential arrangement, and by the time we finished our dessert, we had the outline of a plan. Zoe would connect me with her real estate agent the following week. We'd get an appraisal, and if the numbers worked for both of us, we'd move forward. Walking back to my car after dinner, I felt a profound sense of alignment, as if the various aspects of my life were finally working in harmony rather than in opposition. My career was thriving, my investments were growing, my family relationships were healing, and my friendships were evolving in healthy ways. Not perfect, not without challenges, but fundamentally sound in a way I had never experienced before. The following week brought a flurry of activity. I met with Zoe's real estate agent, arranged for an appraisal of her apartment, and consulted with my financial advisor about the potential investment. The numbers worked, the location was excellent, and the property itself was in impeccable condition. By Friday, we had a preliminary agreement. That was the easiest real estate transaction I've ever been involved with, the agent commented as we wrapped up the paperwork. Usually there's much more negotiation. We both knew what we wanted, I explained, and neither of us was trying to take advantage of the other. It was a simple statement, but one that captured the essence of the shift in my approach to relationships. Clear boundaries, honest communication, and mutual respect created space for everyone's needs to be met without sacrifice or manipulation. That evening, as I reviewed the final draft of the agreement in my home office, my phone rang with a call from my mother. Olivia, do you have a moment? Of course, I replied, setting aside the papers. What's up? I've been thinking about our conversation at brunch, she began. About how our family has changed. Yes, I prompted when she paused. I wanted to tell you something I should have said long ago. Her voice wavered slightly. I'm proud of you, not just for your success or your generosity, but for your courage in standing up for yourself, even when, especially when, it was to me. The words landed like gentle rain on parched soil, unexpected, necessary, healing. Thank you, I said simply, knowing that over-explaining would diminish the moment. My therapist says I've spent too many years defining myself primarily as a mother, measuring my worth by how needed I was, she continued. It made me favor Megan because she seemed to need me more. It made me resent your independence because it felt like rejection. This level of self-awareness from my mother was unprecedented. I remained silent, giving her space to continue. "I'm learning to see myself differently," she said, "as a person with value beyond what I give to others. And I'm learning to see you and Megan differently too, not as extensions of myself or measures of my success, but as separate people with your own paths." "That sounds healthy," I offered, carefully neutral. "It's hard work," she admitted. "Challenging lifelong patterns doesn't happen overnight. But I wanted you to know I'm committed to it, to being a better mother, a better grandmother, and maybe even a better person." "I appreciate that," I told her, meaning it. "And I'm glad you're finding therapy helpful." "There's one more thing," she added, her tone shifting slightly. "Derek mentioned that he discussed the possibility of staying on as tenants in your apartment." I tensed instinctively, prepared for pressure or manipulation. "He did. I want you to know that whatever you decide is entirely your choice," she said firmly. "I have opinions, of course. I always do. But this is your property and your relationship. With Megan and Derek, you don't need my approval or permission." I blinked, genuinely surprised by this explicit acknowledgement of my autonomy. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." "Well," she said, her voice warming, "I'm learning." After we hung up, I sat for a long moment, absorbing the significance of the conversation. My mother's journey toward healthier relationships mirrored my own in many ways, learning to see others clearly, to respect boundaries, to value connection without demanding control. It was imperfect progress, marked by occasional backsliding and old habits reasserting themselves. But it was progress nonetheless, built on countless small choices to do things differently than before. The following day, I invited Derek and Megan to the Penthouse to discuss their rental proposal. They arrived without the children, a rare occurrence that underscored the seriousness of the conversation. "We've prepared some documents," Derek began, setting a folder on the coffee table. "Our current financial status, projected income for the next year, references from previous landlords, and a proposal for rental terms that we believe are fair and sustainable." I opened the folder, impressed by the thoroughness of their preparation. The proposed rent was market rate, with annual increases aligned with typical patterns in the area. They had included provisions for maintenance responsibilities, pet policies. They were considering getting a cat for Liam, and even suggested a biannual property inspection to ensure everything remained in good condition. "This is comprehensive," I acknowledged, closing the folder after reviewing the key points. "You've clearly given this a lot of thought." Megan nodded, her expression earnest. "We wanted you to see that we're serious about making this a proper business arrangement, not asking for special treatment because we're family." I studied them both, noting the quiet confidence that had replaced their former desperation. This wasn't the same couple who had tried to manipulate their way into my home a year ago. These were adults taking responsibility for their choices, prepared to enter into a legitimate agreement with clear terms and expectations. "I've been considering your proposal," I told them, "and consulting with my financial advisor about how it fits into my overall investment strategy." They exchanged a glance, clearly prepared for either answer. "I'm inclined to move forward," I continued, "with a few modifications to the terms." Relief washed over their faces, quickly replaced by attentive focus as we discussed the details. A slightly longer lease term for stability, more specific provisions about renovations or modifications to the apartment, clearer delineation of professional versus personal relationships. By the time we finished, we had the framework of an agreement that respected both my position as property owner and their needs as a growing family. Not a gift, not a sacrifice, but a mutually beneficial arrangement between adults who valued each other's boundaries. "Thank you," Megan said as they prepared to leave. "Not just for this, but for everything, for showing me another way to be, for not giving up on us even when we behaved terribly. I smiled, recognizing the genuine growth in her words. We've all learned a lot this year. After they left, I moved to the terrace, watching as evening settled over the city. Below me, lights began to illuminate the buildings, creating a tapestry of human activity and connection. Somewhere among those lights was my former apartment, now home to my sister's family. Somewhere else was Zoe's apartment, soon to be another investment property in my growing portfolio. Movement and stillness, change and constancy. The city below reflected the paradox of my own life, evolving continuously while remaining fundamentally grounded in my own values and choices. The penthouse had become more than a home to me. It was a vantage point from which I could see the broader landscape of my life, the connections, the investments, the choices that formed the architecture of my existence, not defined by others' expectations or limited by others' needs, but built according to my own design, brick by brick, choice by choice. I had claimed this space both literally and figuratively, not out of selfishness or spite, but out of the profound recognition that I deserved to occupy the center of my own life, that boundaries were not barriers to connection, but the very foundations that made authentic relationships possible. As darkness fell completely, and the city became a constellation of lights against the night sky, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me for years. Not an ending. My story was far too rich and complex for neat conclusions, but perhaps the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Whatever came next, I would face it standing firmly on the foundation I had built, surrounded by relationships that enhanced rather than diminished me, secure in the knowledge that I had finally learned the most important lesson of all, that my life was mine to shape, my choices mine to make, my boundaries mine to defend. And from this penthouse perspective, the view was beautiful indeed. 3 years had passed since that pivotal moment when I refused to give up my apartment to my pregnant sister. 3 years of growth, challenge, learning, and transformation, not just for me, but for our entire family. The consulting business had expanded beyond our initial expectations, now occupying an entire floor in a downtown office building. Derek had proven himself not just capable, but exceptional, eventually becoming a full partner in the enterprise. Megan had built the event planning division into a sought-after service for high-end corporate and social gatherings. My mother, initially helping on a part-time basis, had discovered a talent for client relations that made her an invaluable part of the team. I had continued to expand my real estate investments, adding 2 more properties to my portfolio beyond Zoe's apartment. The penthouse remained my home, my sanctuary, the place where I could stand above the city and see the broader landscape of my life with clarity and perspective. Today was a special occasion, the twins' 3rd birthday celebration, held on the penthouse terrace that had become our family's gathering place for significant events. Emma and Claire, now active preschoolers with distinct personalities and matching dark curls, were the centers of attention, racing around the terrace under the watchful eyes of their parents and grandmother. Liam, now 5 and fiercely protective of his younger sisters, supervised their activities with the serious responsibility of an older brother. "Careful near the glass," he cautioned as Claire ventured toward the railing. "Remember what Aunt Olivia said about safety." I smiled, watching from the outdoor kitchen where I was putting final touches on the birthday cake, chocolate with strawberry filling, the girls' favorite. The ease with which the children moved through my space, respectful but comfortable, reflected the healthy balance we had all worked to create over the years. My mother approached, carrying a tray of juice boxes. "Need any help with that cake?" "Almost done," I assured her. "Just finishing the decorations." She set down the tray and watched as I piped pink frosting roses around the edge. "Your grandmother would be proud. You inherited her steady hands." It was a casual comment, but one that reflected how far we had come. Once, my mother would have compared my efforts unfavorably to Megan's, or suggested improvements rather than offering genuine appreciation. Now she could simply observe a connection between generations, an inheritance passed down without judgment or manipulation. "How's the new medication working?" I asked, referring to the treatment she had recently begun for mild hypertension. "Much better than the first one," she replied. "No dizziness, and my numbers have been consistently in range." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for coming with me to that appointment. The doctor's explanation made more sense with you there asking questions." I nodded, understanding what went unspoken. Our relationship had evolved to the point where I could offer support without being consumed, where she could accept help without demanding control. It was a delicate balance, still requiring conscious effort from both of us, but increasingly natural as we practiced new patterns of interaction. Megan joined us, looking relaxed despite managing twin preschoolers on a terrace 13 floors, above the city. "The cake looks amazing, Liv. The girls are going to lose their minds when they see it." "That's the goal," I replied with a grin. "What's the point of being an aunt if I can't occasionally induce sugar-fueled chaos?" "Easy for you to say," she retorted good-naturedly. "You get to send them home with us afterward." We shared a laugh, the easy camaraderie between us still, sometimes surprising after so many years of competition and resentment. Our relationship had been perhaps the most profound transformation of all. From rivals for parental attention to genuine friends and business partners who valued each other's unique strengths, Derek appeared with a tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt cake preparations, but we just got an email from the Westbrook Foundation. They want to book the terrace again for their annual event, 4th year running." Pride washed over Megan's. "Gee, that's fantastic. Their event last year was featured in Portland Monthly as one of the top charitable gatherings of the season." "Well-deserved recognition," I agreed. "Your design concept was innovative and perfectly executed." My mother beamed at both of us, her pleasure in our shared success evident. There was none of the favoritism that had once poisoned family dynamics. No subtle undermining or comparison. Just genuine appreciation for each person's contributions to our collective enterprise. As we gathered around the table to sing Happy Birthday and watch the twins attempt to blow out their candles, Claire with determined focus, Emma with exuberant excitement, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. That moment of refusal, of finally saying no to demands that diminished me, had not been an ending but a beginning. Not a severing of family ties, but a fundamental recalibration of how those ties functioned. Not selfish isolation, but the establishment of boundaries that made genuine connection possible. Later, after the cake had been devoured, presents opened, and the initial sugar rush somewhat contained, I found myself alone on a quieter section of the terrace with Liam. He was carefully arranging a new set of building blocks the twins had received, creating an elaborate structure with the serious concentration unique to children at play. "What are you building?" I asked, settling beside him. "A castle," he replied without looking up. "For everyone." "It looks impressive," I observed. "Lots of rooms." He nodded, adding another block with precision. "This room is for Mom and Dad," he explained, pointing to one section. "And this is for Emma and Claire, and there's a special tower for Grandma." He looked up at me with solemn eyes. "And this part is yours, Aunt Liv. The highest tower, so you can see everything." I smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Liam. I like being able to see everything." "Mom says you taught her how to build things right," he continued, returning to his construction. "Not just with blocks, but with important things, too." I raised an eyebrow, wondering exactly what Megan had shared with him about our history. "Did she?" "Uh-huh." He placed another block carefully. "She said you showed her that everyone needs their own space, but we can still be together, like puzzle pieces that fit without squishing." Out of the mouths of babes, I marveled at how perfectly this 5-year-old had articulated the essence of healthy boundaries, distinct but connected, separate but aligned, individual but part of a greater whole. "Your mom is very wise," I told him. He nodded seriously. "She says she learned it from you." As the afternoon continued and the birthday celebration began to wind down, I found moments to connect with each family member, helping my mother pack leftovers to take home, discussing an upcoming client meeting with Derek, reviewing photos of the event with Megan, reading a story to the increasingly tired birthday girls. Simple interactions, ordinary moments, yet each reflected the profound shift in how we related to each other, not through obligation or manipulation, not through sacrifice or resentment, but through genuine care bounded by healthy limits and mutual respect. When everyone had left and I was alone in the penthouse once more, I moved through the space, restoring order after the happy chaos of the day. There were frosting smudges on the coffee table, tiny fingerprints on the glass doors, a forgotten hair ribbon under the sofa, evidence of lives intersecting with mine in ways that enriched rather than depleted. I stepped onto the terrace as evening fell, watching as the city transformed from daylight clarity to twilight mystery to nighttime illumination. Below me, thousands of stories unfolded in apartments and houses, offices and restaurants, each with their own complexities and contradictions. Mine was just one story among many, not perfect or complete, but authentically my own. And standing in this space I had claimed for myself, surrounded by evidence of connections that enhanced rather than diminished me, I was finally fully at home. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when my mother demanded I surrender my apartment to Megan. The penthouse had become more than just my home. It was the physical manifestation of my journey toward self-worth and boundaries. Time had a way of crystallizing certain moments, turning them into touchstones that marked the before and after of one's life. That confrontation in my kitchen had been such a moment for me. Today, as summer sunshine bathed the terrace in golden light, I stood watching as the caterers arranged tables for the evening's event. The twins' 5th birthday party would be hosted here, an annual tradition that had evolved from that first tentative visit when they were infants. Now Emma and Claire were vibrant kindergartners with distinct personalities and shared secrets, moving through my space with the easy confidence of children who knew they were welcome but understood boundaries. "The decorations look perfect," remarked a voice behind me. I turned to find Megan, dressed in a flowing summer dress, her hair shorter now than she'd worn it for years. The change suited her, just as the changes in her life had ultimately suited her spirit. "Think the girls will approve?" I asked, gesturing to the fairy tale theme we'd chosen. Miniature castles as centerpieces, twinkling lights strung overhead to simulate stars, tiny fairy houses nestled among potted plants. "They'll be over the moon," Megan confirmed, moving to stand beside me at the railing. Claire has been talking about nothing else all week. Emma's been more secretive, but I caught her practicing her princess wave in the mirror. I smiled, picturing my niece's excitement. "And how's Liam feeling? About another event celebrating his sisters?" "Surprisingly mature about it," Megan replied. "Being 7 has given him perspective, apparently. Plus, Derek promised him a special father-son camping trip next weekend as compensation for enduring, and I quote, all the princess stuff." We shared a laugh, comfortable in the easy camaraderie that had developed between us over the years. What had once been competition was now genuine appreciation for our different strengths and choices. I admired Megan's patience with her children, her creativity in the business we'd built together, her growth into someone who could acknowledge her needs without demanding others sacrifice to meet them. She respected my boundaries, my focus, my ability to create structure and stability. "The new client signed the contract, by the way," she mentioned, turning to survey the city skyline. "That makes 3 major accounts this quarter. The expansion is officially paying for itself ahead of schedule." Our business had grown steadily over the years, evolving from a small consulting operation into a comprehensive marketing and events firm with 15 employees beyond our family core. Derek handled business development, Megan ran the events division, and I managed operations and strategy. Even my mother had found her place, overseeing client relations with a warmth and attention, to detail that had earned her the nickname the ambassador among our staff. That's excellent news, I acknowledged. How are the new hires working out? Better than expected. That junior event coordinator you were uncertain about has turned out to have an exceptional eye for detail. She caught a scheduling conflict. Yesterday, that could have been disastrous if it had gone unnoticed. I nodded, pleased but not surprised. Megan's instincts about people had always been good. She just needed the structure and framework to apply them effectively. Our business partnership had provided that, allowing her natural talents to flourish, without the chaos that had previously characterized her approach to life. The elevator chimed, signaling new arrivals. Derek emerged, carrying a large box of party supplies, followed by Liam, who was carefully transporting what appeared to be a science project. "Special delivery," Derek announced, setting down the box. The custom unicorn piñata that was apparently essential to the twins' happiness. "I had no idea you'd ordered that," I remarked to Megan, raising an eyebrow. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Last-minute addition. The girls saw one at their friend's party last month and have been dropping hints ever since. I meant to mention it." 5 years ago, this might have been a flashpoint, an assumption about using my space, a boundary crossed without discussion. Now, it was simply a minor oversight between partners who had established enough trust that small infractions didn't threaten the foundation. "No problem," I assured her. "We can hang it from the pergola over there." I turned my attention to Liam. "And what have you got there, scientist?" He beamed, setting his project carefully on a side table. "It's a weather prediction model, Aunt Liv. I made it with my science club. It can tell if it's going to rain, based on air pressure and humidity." He pointed to various components with the serious expertise of a 7-year-old who had found his passion. "I brought it because there's a 20% chance of precipitation this evening, and I wanted to monitor conditions." I knelt to examine his creation, genuinely impressed by the workmanship. "This is remarkable, Liam. You built this yourself?" "Mostly," he admitted. "Dad helped with the soldering because school rules say kids can't use hot tools, but I did all the design and assembly." Derek ruffled his son's hair with obvious pride. He's got an engineer's mind, takes after his aunt. The casual compliment warmed me. Derek and I had developed a solid relationship over the years, built on mutual respect and appreciation for each other's strengths. He had transformed from a man hiding his failures behind bravado to a reliable partner who owned both his mistakes and his accomplishments. "Where should we set up the prediction station?" I asked Liam seriously. He considered the terrace layout, with critical assessment. "Somewhere elevated, away from direct sun, with clear exposure to the prevailing winds." He pointed to a corner of the terrace. "That spot would be optimal." I nodded, impressed by his analytical approach. "Perfect. Why don't you get it set up while we finish arranging everything else?" As he hurried off, Derek turned to me. "He's been working on that project for weeks. Wouldn't let anyone help beyond the absolute minimum required for safety." "Sounds familiar," Megan commented with a knowing glance in my direction. "Wonder where he gets that independent streak. Certainly not from his mother, who would routinely hand half-finished projects to her sister to complete," I teased. The old memory now transformed into gentle humor rather than resentment. "Fair point," Megan acknowledged with a laugh. "Though, in my defense, I've improved significantly. Ask any of our clients." "She has," Derek confirmed. "The Westbrook Foundation specifically requested her for their annual event. Said no one else captures their vision as completely." This was the most profound change in our dynamic. the ability to acknowledge each other's growth and success without competition or diminishment. Megan could celebrate my achievements without feeling inadequate. I could appreciate her talents without fearing exploitation. We had become, in many ways, the sisters we might have been without the toxic family patterns that had shaped our early relationship. The caterers finished their setup and departed, promising to return an hour before the party to handle final preparations. Derek went to help Liam with his weather station, leaving Megan and me alone on the terrace once more. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said, her tone turning more serious. "It's about Mom." I turned to face her fully, giving her my complete attention. "What about her? Have you noticed anything off lately? She seems more forgetful. Last week she missed a client meeting, which isn't like her at all. And yesterday she called me by your name 3 times in one conversation." I frowned, considering. Now that you mention it, she did seem confused about some details during our strategy session on Tuesday. I attributed it to fatigue, but perhaps there's more to it. Our mother was now in her early 70s, still active in the business, though on a reduced schedule. She had continued her therapy over the years, developing healthier relationships with both of us and becoming a devoted grandmother to Megan's children. The thought of her facing cognitive decline brought a sharp pang of concern. "I think we should encourage her to see her doctor," Megan suggested. "Frame it as a routine checkup, nothing alarming, but make sure they do a cognitive assessment." I nodded, appreciating Megan's thoughtful approach. "Good thinking. I'll talk to her about it tomorrow. We're scheduled to have lunch." "Let me know what she says," Megan requested. "I'd go with her to the appointment if she's comfortable with that." "Of course." This too was new. The ability to address family concerns as equals, each bringing our strengths to the situation without assumption about who should take primary responsibility. Once, all caregiving duties would have automatically fallen to me, the reliable daughter. Now, we approached such matters as partners, each contributing according to our capabilities and relationship with the person involved. The elevator chimed again, announcing new arrivals. The twins burst onto the terrace in a flurry of excitement, followed more sedately by my mother, who was carrying a large gift bag. "Aunt Olivia," they chorused, racing toward me for hugs. Claire, always the more exuberant, nearly knocked me off balance with the force of her embrace, while Emma, more reserved but equally affectionate, wrapped her arms around my waist. "The birthday princesses arrive," I announced, kneeling to their level. "How does it feel to be turning 5? "Amazing!" Claire declared with characteristic enthusiasm. "Significant," Emma replied thoughtfully. "It's a whole hand now." She demonstrated by spreading her fingers wide. I smiled at their contrasting responses, each perfectly reflecting their personalities. "Well, I think this party is going to be equally amazing and significant. Want to see what we've prepared?" As I led them around the terrace, showing them the decorations and explaining the evening's festivities, my mother approached Megan with the gift bag. "These are the photo albums you asked for," I overheard her saying. "I found pictures of you and Olivia at about the twins' age. Thought they might enjoy seeing their mom and aunt when they were little." "Thanks, Mom," Megan replied, peeking into the bag. "Perfect for the display table." I caught my mother's eye over the twins' heads and smiled warmly. She returned the gesture, though I noticed a slight uncertainty in her expression that confirmed Megan's concerns. I made a mental note to be particularly attentive during our lunch the following day. The rest of the afternoon passed in a flurry of final preparations. Liam provided regular weather updates from his monitoring station. Precipitation probability decreasing to 15%, optimal conditions anticipated for evening festivities. The twins explored every corner of the terrace, asking detailed questions about each decoration and arrangement. My mother sat in a comfortable chair, occasionally offering suggestions, but mostly content to observe the activity around her. By the time the caterers returned and the first guests began to arrive, The penthouse terrace had been transformed into an enchanted garden worthy of the fairy tale theme. Twinkling lights created a magical atmosphere as dusk approached. The twins' friends arrived with their parents, many of whom were also our business clients, the personal and professional aspects of our lives having developed a comfortable overlap over the years. I circulated among the guests, ensuring everyone had what they needed, occasionally catching glimpses of my family members in their elements. Megan orchestrating activities with natural flair, Derek engaging parents in animated conversation, Liam earnestly explaining his weather station to interested adults, the twins reveling in being the centers of attention. My mother found me near the dessert table, arranging cupcakes in the shape of a castle. "You've created something wonderful here," she said softly, gesturing to encompass not just the party, but perhaps everything the terrace represented. Our business, our reconciled family, our individual journeys. "We all have," I corrected gently. She nodded, a flash of her old certainty returning. "Yes, but it started with you, with your refusal to be diminished." She glanced toward Megan, who was leading the children in a game. "It was the best thing you could have done for all of us. Though I was too stubborn to see it then." I squeezed her hand, acknowledging the truth in her words without dwelling on past mistakes. "We're in a good place now. That's what matters." As the party reached its pinnacle with the cake presentation, a spectacular three-tiered creation, featuring miniature replicas of the twins perched atop a castle, I found myself standing slightly apart, taking in the scene with a sense of quiet fulfillment. This terrace, this penthouse, had never been merely about square footage or status or material comfort. It had been about claiming space, literal and figurative, in which I could exist fully, without diminishment or erasure. It had been about establishing boundaries that ultimately made genuine connection possible. Looking at my family now, transformed by that single act of refusal 5 years ago, I knew that the greatest gift I had given them was not financial support or professional opportunity, but the example of standing firm in my own worth. Megan had learned to build her life on solid foundations rather than shifting sands of manipulation. Derek had discovered his authentic talents when freed from the pressure to maintain appearances. My mother had begun the difficult work of seeing her daughters as they truly were, not as extensions of herself or reflections of her parenting. And I had learned that maintaining boundaries didn't mean isolation, that I could be connected without being consumed, generous without being depleted. As the twins prepared to blow out their candles, Megan caught my eye across the terrace and mouthed, "Thank you." Not for the party, I knew, but for everything these past 5 years had brought. I nodded in acknowledgement, no words necessary, between us. The girls made their wishes with characteristic difference, Claire with dramatic flair, Emma with serious concentration, and the guests erupted in applause. In that moment of celebration, surrounded by the family we had rebuilt and the lives we had reclaimed, I felt a profound sense of rightness, not perfection. Our story was too complex for such simplistic resolution, but alignment, as if all the pieces of my life were finally arranged in a pattern that made sense. Later, after the guests had departed and only family remained, we gathered on the terrace to watch the sunset paint the city in hues of gold and rose. The twins, exhausted but still buzzing with excitement, curled against their parents on a large outdoor sofa. Liam, satisfied with the accuracy of his weather predictions, was carefully documenting final readings in a notebook. My mother sat nearby, her expression peaceful as she gazed out at the view. "Aunt Olivia?" Emma said suddenly, her voice carrying the particular gravity she applied to important observations. "This is my favorite place in the whole world." "Mine too," Claire agreed fervently. "It's like being on top of everything, but still part of it." I smiled at their perceptiveness. "That's exactly how I feel about it." "Is that why you didn't let Mom and Dad have your old apartment?" Liam asked unexpectedly, looking up from his notebook. Because you knew you needed your own special place? A moment of startled silence followed his question. The children knew a sanitized version of our family history, that there had been disagreements, that we had worked through them, that we were stronger for the experience. But we hadn't shared the details of that initial confrontation or the manipulation that preceded it. Before I could formulate a response, Megan spoke. That's part of it, Liam. Aunt Olivia taught us all an important lesson about respecting each other's spaces and choices. And about being honest, Derek added, meeting my gaze with genuine respect. About facing problems directly instead of trying to take shortcuts. My mother nodded, her expression reflective. Sometimes families make mistakes. The important part is learning from them and doing better next time. Liam considered this, his analytical mind clearly processing the subtext of adult conversations. So it's like my science experiments. When something doesn't work, you have to figure out why and fix the variables, not just pretend the results were different. I smiled at his perfect analogy. Exactly like that. And sometimes the experiment works better than you could have imagined, even if it didn't go according to the original plan. He nodded, satisfied with this explanation, and returned to his notebook. The twins, less interested in the philosophical implications, had moved on to debating which birthday present was best. Claire advocating for the art set, Emma firmly in favor of the astronomy kit. As darkness fell completely and the city became a constellation of lights against the night sky, Derek and Megan gathered their children and belongings, preparing to return to their apartment. Still my property technically, but their home in every meaningful sense. The rental arrangement had evolved into a stable, long-term situation that worked for all of us, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Lunch on Sunday? Megan confirmed as they prepared to leave. I'll bring that. New dessert recipe I've been experimenting with. Looking forward to it, I assured her. And let me know what you find out about those photos for the company anniversary display. After goodbye hugs and final birthday wishes, they departed, leaving me alone with my mother. She seemed tired but content, her earlier confusion not currently evident. Would you like to stay in the guest room tonight? I offered. It's getting late. She considered for a moment, then shook her head. Thank you, but I think I'll sleep better in my own place. My taxi app says a car can be here in 5 minutes. This too was part of our new dynamic, the ability to offer and decline assistance without manipulation or offense. I walked her to the elevator, confirming our lunch plans for the following day, and reminding her about the doctor's appointment I planned to suggest. After she left, I returned to the terrace alone, surveying the aftermath of the celebration. The caterers had cleaned up the bulk of the party debris, but there were still scattered remnants of the evening: a forgotten hair ribbon, a small toy unicorn, a child's drawing left on a side table. Evidence of lives intersecting with mine in ways that enriched rather than depleted. I gathered these small treasures to return at our next gathering, then stood at the railing, gazing out at the city stretched below. From this vantage point, I could see much of downtown Portland, including the building where my former apartment, now Megan and Derek's home, was located. I could see the office tower that housed our growing business, the park where I often took the twins for Saturday morning adventures, the restaurant where my mother and I had our weekly lunches. The geography of my life, visible and interconnected, yet each element distinct and bounded. Just as our family had become, connected without being enmeshed, supportive without being suffocating, loving without demanding sacrifice. It had begun with a refusal, with finally saying no to demands that diminished me. But it had become something far more profound, a reclaiming not just of physical space but of personal worth, not just of boundaries but of the very possibility of genuine connection that only boundaries could enable. Standing alone yet surrounded by evidence of meaningful relationship, I felt a sense of completion that had once seemed impossible. Not an ending, Our story was too rich and complex for neat conclusions, but perhaps the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Whatever came next, I would face it standing firmly on the foundation I had built, brick by brick, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. In the penthouse that had become both refuge and vantage point, both symbol and reality of a life fully claimed and freely lived. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.